The blood pooling beneath the wagon wheels told Logan Quillen everything he needed to know about the situation before he even reached the overturned vehicle on the rutted trail outside Council Bluffs, Iowa, in the spring of 1871. His horse, a sturdy Appaloosa named Thunder, stamped nervously as Logan dismounted in one fluid motion, his buckskin-clad frame moving with the practiced ease of a man who had spent the better part of 30 years navigating the wild territories. His dark hair, long enough to brush his shoulders, caught in the wind as he approached, his muscular arms already working to assess the wreckage. Two bodies lay crushed beneath the wagon, a man and woman who had clearly not survived when their axle snapped and sent them tumbling down the embankment. But something else caught his attention, a soft whimper coming from inside the covered portion of the wagon that now rested at an angle against a cottonwood tree. Logan moved swiftly, his powerful hands gripping the canvas and tearing it aside. Inside, huddled in a corner with blood seeping through her dress, was a young woman with golden hair matted to her pale face. Her green eyes flickered open, glazed with pain and shock, and she tried to speak but only managed a gasp. He could see immediately that she was badly hurt, a deep gash across her abdomen that needed immediate attention. Without hesitation, Logan gathered her carefully into his arms, feeling how light she was, how fragile. She could not have been more than 23 or 24 years old, and the wedding ring on her finger told him she had likely been traveling with her husband, probably the man crushed beneath the wagon's weight. "I have you now," Logan said, his deep voice steady and calm despite the urgency of the situation. "You are going to be all right." The woman's eyes rolled back, and she lost consciousness as Logan carried her to his horse. He secured her as gently as possible, mounting behind her and holding her against his broad chest, as he urged Thunder into a gallop toward Council Bluffs. The town was growing rapidly, benefiting from its position as a major outfitting point for westward travelers, and Logan knew there was a doctor there, along with a midwife who had a reputation for being able to handle the most difficult cases. The ride seemed to take forever, though it was likely only 20 minutes before the buildings of Council Bluffs came into view, the Missouri River glinting in the distance beyond the town's edge. People scattered as Logan thundered down the main street, calling out for the doctor. A shopkeeper pointed toward a white house at the end of the road, and Logan directed Thunder that way, pulling up hard in front of the building. He dismounted with the woman still in his arms, kicking the door open with his boot. Inside, a gray-haired woman with sharp eyes and capable hands looked up from where she was organizing medical supplies. "Good Lord," she breathed, immediately gesturing toward a table. "Put her here, quickly now." Logan laid the woman down as gently as he could, stepping back to give the midwife room to work. The older woman's name was Clara, and she had seen her share of emergencies in her 40 years of practice. She cut away the bloodied dress with scissors, revealing the extent of the injury. The gash was deep but mercifully had missed the vital organs. What concerned Clara more was the bruising across the woman's lower abdomen, the kind of impact that could cause internal damage of a different sort. "She needs stitching," Clara said, already threading a needle. "And prayer." "Go fetch Dr. Morrison from his office 2 streets over, the brown building with the sign." Logan hesitated, his eyes on the unconscious woman's face. Something about her struck him deeply, though he could not name what it was. Perhaps it was simply the vulnerability, the way she had looked at him with those green eyes before passing out, trusting him to save her. He forced himself to turn and leave, jogging through the streets until he found the doctor's office. Dr. Morrison, a portly man in his 50s with spectacles perched on his nose, listened to Logan's hurried explanation, and grabbed his bag, following the mountain man back to Clara's house. The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Logan waited outside, pacing the porch like a caged animal. He had never been good at sitting still, preferring the solitude of the mountains and forests where he trapped and hunted, only coming into towns like Council Bluffs a few times a year to trade his furs and stock up on supplies. Yet here he was, unable to leave, compelled to stay until he knew whether the woman would survive. The sun was setting when Clara finally emerged, wiping her hands on her apron, her expression weary. "She will live," Clara said, and Logan felt a rush of relief so powerful it surprised him. "The wound is stitched and clean. No infection yet, though we will have to watch her carefully over the next few days. She is strong, that one, fought hard to stay with us." "Her husband?" Logan asked, though he already knew the answer. "Dead, I assume, from the wagon accident you described," Clara said, her voice softening. "Poor girl. She will wake to a harsh new reality. She has no identification on her, nothing to tell us who she is or where she was headed." "I will stay until she wakes," Logan found himself saying. "Make sure she is all right." Clara studied him with those sharp eyes, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "You have a good heart, Logan Quillen. I remember you from when you brought in those children you found lost in the woods 2 winters ago. Very well, you can sleep in the spare room upstairs, but wash up first. You smell like the wilderness." Logan managed a slight grin, something he did not do often, and followed Clara's directions to the washroom. He cleaned up as best he could, though he kept his buckskin clothes on, having no others with him. When he returned to the main room, he found a chair beside the bed where the woman lay, now dressed in a clean nightgown that Clara must have provided. Her face was peaceful in sleep, the color slowly returning to her cheeks. Logan settled into the chair, his large frame making it look almost comically small, and began his vigil. The woman did not wake that night, nor the next morning. Dr. Morrison came by to check on her, pronouncing her stable but cautioning that she had been through severe trauma. It was late afternoon on the second day when her eyelids finally fluttered open. Logan was there, as he had been almost constantly, leaving only for brief moments to tend to Thunder and eat the food Clara brought him. The woman's green eyes focused slowly, confusion evident in their depths as she took in her surroundings. "Where am I?" she whispered, her voice hoarse. "Council Bluffs," Logan said, leaning forward. "You were in a wagon accident. Do you remember?" The woman's face crumpled as memory returned, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Thomas, my husband. The wheel broke and we were going down the hill and everything was spinning and—" "I am sorry," Logan said, wishing he had better words, something that could ease her pain. "He did not survive, neither did the other person in the wagon." "That was his brother, Marcus," the woman said, her voice breaking. "We were traveling from Illinois, heading to California. Thomas heard there was opportunity there that we could start fresh." She closed her eyes, more tears leaking out. "Now there is nothing, no fresh start, no husband, no future." "What is your name?" Logan asked gently. "Grace," she said, opening her eyes to look at him properly for the first time. "Grace Hartley. Who are you?" "Logan Quillen. I found you after the accident, brought you here to Clara, the midwife." Grace studied his face, taking in the strong jaw covered in dark stubble, the broad shoulders, the way his hair fell around his face, the intense eyes that held unexpected kindness. "You saved my life. Anyone would have done the same. But you were the one who did," Grace said softly. "Thank you." Over the following days, as Grace slowly regained her strength, Logan found himself inventing reasons to stay in Council Bluffs. He told himself it was to ensure she recovered fully, that she had someone to look out for her since she was now alone in the world. But the truth was more complicated. He found himself drawn to Grace in a way he had never experienced before. At 32 years old, Logan had lived most of his adult life alone, preferring the company of mountains and rivers to people. He had been married once, briefly, when he was 19, but his young wife had died of fever within a year. After that, Logan had retreated into the wilderness, becoming the kind of man others whispered about, the solitary mountain man who could survive anything, who was more comfortable with a rifle in his hands than engaging in polite conversation. Yet Grace made him want to try conversation. She made him want to stay in one place, to be near her. As she recovered, he learned about her life. She had married Thomas Hartley when she was 18, and they had spent the past 6 years trying to build a life together in Illinois. They had struggled, Thomas never quite able to hold down work, always dreaming of the next big opportunity. The move to California had been his latest plan, and Grace had supported it, hoping that maybe this time things would work out. Now she was 24 years old, widowed, with nothing to her name except the clothes Clara had given her and the wedding ring she still wore. Clara noticed the way Logan looked at Grace, and the way Grace's face brightened when Logan entered the room. The midwife was a practical woman, but she believed in love when she saw it, and she saw the beginnings of something real between these two wounded souls. A week after the accident, when Grace was finally able to sit up for extended periods and take short walks around the house, Clara decided it was time to have a frank conversation with her patient. "I need to examine you more thoroughly," Clara said one morning after Logan had stepped out to check on his horse. "The impact you took in the accident, it concerns me." Grace's face paled. "What do you mean?" "The bruising across your lower abdomen was severe," Clara said carefully, helping Grace lie back on the bed. "I want to make sure everything is healing properly inside." The examination was uncomfortable, and Clara's face grew increasingly serious as she worked. When she finally helped Grace sit up again, the midwife's expression was grave. "Tell me true," Clara said. "Had you and your husband been trying for children?" Grace nodded, fresh pain crossing her features. "For years. It never happened. We thought perhaps it would in time, but now." She trailed off, understanding dawning. "Is something wrong?" Clara took Grace's hand in both of hers. "My dear, the damage from the accident combined with what I am feeling suggests there were already problems. The position of your womb, the scarring I can detect, these are not things caused by the accident alone. I believe you had a condition that was present before, something that would have made conceiving very difficult. The impact you sustained has made it worse. I am so sorry, Grace, but I do not believe you will ever be able to have children." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Grace stared at Clara, her green eyes filling with tears that spilled over and ran down her cheeks. In an era when a woman's worth was so often measured by her ability to bear children, when motherhood was considered the highest calling, this news was devastating. Grace had always imagined herself with children, had dreamed of the babies she and Thomas would have. Now Thomas was gone, and even the dream of children was being ripped away. "Are you certain?" Grace whispered. "As certain as I can be without more advanced medical knowledge than I possess," Clara said honestly. "Dr. Morrison concurs with my assessment. We could seek another opinion in a larger city, but I do not wish to give you false hope. The likelihood is very small." Grace turned her face away, her whole body shaking with silent sobs. Clara sat with her, offering what comfort she could, but there were no words that could truly ease this kind of loss. When Logan returned an hour later, he found Clara in the kitchen, her own eyes red-rimmed. "What happened?" Logan demanded, his protective instincts flaring. "Is Grace all right?" Clara hesitated, bound by the confidentiality of her profession, but also aware that Logan had proven himself trustworthy. "She has had difficult news, medical news. Perhaps you should speak with her yourself if she wishes to tell you." Logan took the stairs 2 at a time, his heart pounding with worry. He knocked softly on the door to Grace's room, and when he heard her muffled voice tell him to enter, he did so carefully. Grace was sitting by the window, her face turned toward the glass, tears still streaming down her cheeks. She did not look at him as he entered. "Grace," Logan said softly, crossing the room to stand near her. "What is wrong?" "Everything," Grace said, her voice thick with grief. "Everything is wrong, Logan. My husband is dead, I have nothing. And now Clara tells me I can never have children. My body is broken. I am broken." Logan felt his chest tighten with an emotion he could not name. He knelt beside Grace's chair, bringing himself to her eye level, and waited until she finally turned to look at him. Her green eyes were devastated, and he wished he could take her pain into himself, bear it for her. "You are not broken," Logan said firmly. "You are alive. You survived something that killed 2 grown men. That makes you strong, not broken." "But I cannot have children," Grace said, a fresh sob escaping. "What man would want a woman who cannot give him a family? I am 24 years old, a widow with nothing to offer anyone." Logan reached out slowly, giving Grace time to pull away if she wanted, and took her hand in his much larger one. His palm was calloused from years of hard work, but his touch was gentle. "You are wrong about something," Logan said, his deep voice steady and sure. "You have everything to offer. And as for children, well, a family is more than just blood. But even if that were not true, even if children were the only measure of a woman's worth, which they are not, you would still be valuable, Grace. You would still deserve love and happiness and a good life." Grace searched his face, seeing the sincerity there, the conviction. "You really believe that?" "I know it," Logan said. "And I will tell you something else. Any man who would reject you for something beyond your control is not worth your time or tears. The right man would not care. The right man would see you, Grace Hartley, not just your ability to bear children." "Would you?" Grace asked, the question slipping out before she could stop it. "Would you care?" Logan held her gaze, his thumb brushing gently across her knuckles. He had not planned to speak his feelings so soon, had thought to give her more time to heal, to grieve her husband properly. But sitting here, looking into her eyes, he could not bring himself to lie or deflect. "No," Logan said simply. "I would not care. Because if I were fortunate enough to have your heart, Grace, I would not need anything else. You could have my whole heart in return, and that would be enough. More than enough. That would be everything." The words hung between them, weighted with meaning and promise. Grace felt something shift in her chest, a small light breaking through the darkness of her grief. She barely knew this man, this mountain man who had appeared in her life like some kind of guardian angel, yet she felt safer with him than she had ever felt with Thomas. Logan had stayed by her bedside for days, asking nothing in return, expecting nothing. He had been patient and kind and strong, and now he was offering her something she had thought lost forever: hope. "You do not even know me," Grace whispered. "Then let me know you," Logan said. "Stay in Council Bluffs. Let me court you properly, the way you deserve. I know you are grieving your husband, and I will respect that. I am not asking for anything immediate. I am simply asking for the chance to show you that you have a future, that you can be happy again." Grace felt more tears coming, but these were different, not born entirely of grief. "My marriage to Thomas was not what people thought. He was not cruel, but he was not kind either. He cared more about his dreams than he did about me. I mourn the loss of what I wished we had more than what we actually had. Is that terrible of me?" "It is honest," Logan said. "And honesty is never terrible." Over the next weeks, Grace's physical strength returned. Clara declared her healed enough to move out of the infirmary room, and Logan helped her find a small boarding house room that he paid for, despite Grace's protests. He also helped her find work at the general store, where her neat handwriting and honest demeanor made her a valuable asset for keeping inventory and helping customers. Logan himself took odd jobs around Council Bluffs, breaking his usual pattern of disappearing back into the wilderness. He told himself it was because winter would come soon enough and he might as well earn money in town, but everyone, including Logan himself, knew the real reason. He was courting Grace Hartley, and he was not about to leave her alone. Their courtship was unconventional by the standards of the day. Logan was not skilled at flowery words or traditional romantic gestures. Instead, he showed his feelings through action. He repaired the loose step on Grace's boarding house stairs without being asked. He brought her fresh meat from his hunting trips in the surrounding countryside. He walked her home from work every evening, his imposing presence ensuring no one bothered her. He listened when she talked about her fears and dreams, and he shared his own stories of life in the mountains, painting pictures with his words that made Grace long to see those wild places. Grace found herself falling in love with Logan in a way that felt entirely different from her youthful marriage to Thomas. What she felt for Logan was deeper, built on respect and genuine connection rather than youthful infatuation. She loved the way his face softened when he looked at her, the way his hands were so strong yet so gentle, the way he seemed to understand her silences as well as her words. She loved that he had never once made her feel less than because she could not bear children, that he seemed genuinely unconcerned with that fact. One evening in late August, nearly 4 months after the accident that had brought them together, Logan took Grace for a walk along the Missouri River. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that reflected off the water's surface. They walked in comfortable silence for a while before Logan stopped, turning to face Grace. His expression was serious, and Grace felt her heart begin to race. "Grace," Logan began, his voice rough with emotion, "I was not looking for this. For you. I had convinced myself I was meant to live alone, that I was too rough for civilized life, too set in my ways to change. But then I found you in that wagon and everything shifted. These past months have been the happiest of my life. You make me want to be a better man, to build something lasting instead of just surviving day to day." Grace reached up to touch his face, feeling the roughness of his beard beneath her palm. "You already are a good man, Logan. The best I have ever known." "Then marry me," Logan said, the words coming out in a rush. "I know it has not been long, and I know you are still healing from everything that happened, but I do not want to waste any more time. Life is too short, too uncertain. I want to spend whatever days I have left making you happy, building a life with you. I have money saved from years of trapping. We could buy land, build a house. Or if you prefer, we could stay in Council Bluffs where you have started to make friends. Whatever you want, Grace. Just say you will be my wife." Grace felt tears welling up, but they were good tears this time, joyful ones. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. "Yes, Logan, I will marry you. I love you. I did not think I could feel this way, especially not so soon after losing Thomas. But what I feel for you is real and true, and I do not want to waste time either." Logan pulled her into his arms, and Grace went willingly, feeling the solid strength of him, the steady beat of his heart against her ear. He tilted her face up and kissed her, and it was gentle at first but quickly deepened into something more passionate, more desperate. They were two people who had found each other against all odds, who had chosen to build something beautiful from tragedy and loss. They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the church in Council Bluffs. Clara served as Grace's attendant, while a fellow trapper named Jim stood up for Logan. Grace wore a simple blue dress that Clara had helped her sew, and Logan wore new clothes he had purchased specifically for the occasion, though he looked slightly uncomfortable in the starched shirt and jacket. But when he saw Grace walking down the aisle toward him, his face transformed with such open love and awe that several people in the congregation got misty-eyed. The wedding night was tender and careful, Logan ever mindful of Grace's healing body and emotional state. He made love to her with a reverence that brought tears to her eyes, showing her without words how precious she was to him. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the bed of the small house Logan had rented for them, and Grace felt a peace she had never known before. "Thank you," she whispered into the darkness. "For what?" Logan asked, his hand stroking her hair. "For choosing me, for loving me exactly as I am." Logan kissed the top of her head. "I should be thanking you. You took a rough mountain man and made him want to be part of the world again." In the months that followed, Logan and Grace built their life together. Logan used his savings to purchase a piece of land about 5 miles outside of Council Bluffs, where he built them a sturdy cabin with his own hands. Grace helped where she could, and she transformed the interior into a real home, with curtains she sewed and furniture Logan crafted during the winter months. They planted a garden in the spring, and Grace proved to have a natural talent for coaxing vegetables from the Iowa soil. Life was not without its challenges. Money was sometimes tight, and the work was hard. Logan still trapped during the winter months, though he stayed much closer to home now, never wanting to be away from Grace for more than a few days at a time. Grace sometimes struggled with sadness over her inability to have children, particularly when she would see mothers with babies in town. But Logan was always there to remind her that their love was enough, that they had each other, and that was more than many people ever had. It was Grace who first suggested they might consider other ways to build a family. She had been working as a volunteer at the church, helping with various charitable efforts, when she learned about children who needed homes. Orphans from wagon trains that had met with disaster, children whose parents had died of disease or accident, leaving them alone in the world. Grace came home one evening bursting with an idea. "Logan," she said as they sat down to dinner, "what would you think about opening our home to children who need one?" Logan looked up from his plate, considering. "You mean orphans?" "Yes," Grace said, leaning forward eagerly. "There are so many children who need families, who need love. We have this house, this land, and we have love to give. Just because I cannot bear children does not mean we cannot be parents." A slow smile spread across Logan's face. "Grace Quillen, you are a brilliant woman. I think that is a fine idea, a very fine idea indeed." They started small, taking in a sibling pair first. Peter and Sarah were aged 7 and 5 respectively, children whose parents had died during a cholera outbreak that had swept through Council Bluffs the previous summer. The children were wary at first, particularly of Logan with his imposing size and rough appearance. But Grace's gentle patience and Logan's quiet kindness gradually won them over. Logan taught Peter to fish and hunt, skills the boy took to with enthusiasm. Grace taught Sarah to read and do needlework, and the little girl blossomed under the attention. Word spread about the Quillens and their willingness to take in children who needed homes. Over the next 2 years, 4 more children joined their household. There was Michael, age 9, who had been traveling with his uncle when the man died of a heart attack. There were twin girls, Emma and Ellen, aged 6, whose mother had died in childbirth, and whose father had abandoned them at the church steps. And there was baby Daniel, only 8 months old, whose mother had died of fever and who had no other living relatives. Their cabin, which had seemed spacious for 2, suddenly felt crowded with 7. But it also felt full of life and love and laughter. Logan built an addition onto the house, creating more sleeping space and a larger kitchen. Grace organized the chaos with gentle efficiency, establishing routines and rules that gave the children structure and security. And every night, after the children were asleep, Logan and Grace would sit together on the porch, watching the stars and marveling at how their life had turned out. "Sometimes I think about that day you found me in the wagon," Grace said one evening, nestled against Logan's side. "I thought my life was over, I had lost everything." "And now?" Logan asked, his arm tightening around her. "Now I have everything I never knew I needed," Grace said. "These children, this life with you, it is more than I ever dreamed possible. You know what Clara said to me the other day?" "What?" "She said that some women give birth to their children, and some women give birth to their families in other ways. She said what we are doing, opening our home and hearts to these children, is just as important as bearing them ourselves. Maybe more so, because these children had no one else." Logan kissed the top of his wife's head, his heart so full he thought it might burst. "Clara is a wise woman, and you, Grace Quillen, are an extraordinary mother. These children are lucky to have you, lucky to have us." The years passed, each one bringing its own joys and challenges. Peter grew into a strong young man who shared Logan's love of the outdoors. He learned trapping and hunting from Logan, and by the time he was 17, he was working alongside his adoptive father as a full partner. Sarah became a skilled seamstress and helped Grace with the younger children, showing a maternal instinct that suggested she might want a family of her own someday. Michael discovered a talent for woodworking and began crafting furniture that they sold in Council Bluffs, adding to the family income. The twins, Emma and Ellen, were inseparable and brought endless energy and laughter to the household. And baby Daniel grew into a curious, affectionate boy who followed Logan around like a shadow, chattering constantly. The Quillen house became known throughout the region as a place where lost children could find home and hope. Grace and Logan never turned away a child in need, though they sometimes had to get creative with sleeping arrangements. Logan built bunk beds and expanded the cabin twice more. Grace organized the older children to help with the younger ones, creating a family dynamic that worked despite its unconventional nature. It was not always easy. There were nights when Grace cried from exhaustion, when the weight of caring for so many children felt overwhelming. There were times when Logan worried about money, about whether he could provide adequately for such a large family. But they faced these challenges together, supporting each other, and somehow they always made it work. The love they shared, and the love they gave to their children, was enough to sustain them through the difficult times. When Grace was 30 years old, 6 years after her marriage to Logan, something unexpected happened. She had been feeling unwell for several weeks, experiencing nausea and fatigue that she attributed to the busy household, and a stomach ailment that had been making the rounds. But when the symptoms persisted, Logan insisted she see Clara, who was now in her 60s but still practicing midwifery. Clara's examination was thorough, and when she finished, the old midwife had tears in her eyes. She took Grace's hands in hers, squeezing tightly. "My dear girl," Clara said, her voice trembling with emotion, "I do not know how to explain this, and I would not believe it myself if I were not seeing the evidence with my own eyes, but you are with child. Pregnant, perhaps 3 months along." Grace stared at Clara in shock. "That is not possible. You said I could never have children. You were certain." "I was certain based on everything I knew and had examined," Clara said. "But it seems that God or nature or whatever force governs these things had other plans. Your body has healed in ways I did not think possible. Or perhaps this is simply a miracle. I do not claim to understand it, but the evidence is clear. You are going to have a baby, Grace." Grace felt her legs go weak, and she sat down heavily in the nearest chair. A baby. Her own child, born of her body. She had given up on this dream years ago, had made peace with building her family through adoption. And now, impossibly, miraculously, she was going to be a mother in the way she had once thought forever denied to her. "Does Logan know you came here today?" Clara asked. Grace shook her head, still too stunned to form words properly. "I told him I was just coming for a general checkup. He is in town selling furs." "Oh, Clara, how do I tell him this? What if something goes wrong? What if the baby does not survive? What if my body still cannot do this?" Clara knelt beside Grace's chair, her old knees protesting but her determination strong. "Listen to me, Grace. I will not lie to you. There are risks. Your body has been through trauma and you are not as young as some first-time mothers. But you are also strong and healthy, and you have already proven you can survive anything. We will monitor you closely throughout the pregnancy. You will rest more, work less, and we will pray. But I believe with everything in me that you can do this. That you will hold your baby in your arms come spring." Grace made Clara promise not to tell anyone, not even Dr. Morrison yet, until Grace had a chance to tell Logan. She walked home in a daze, her hand pressed against her still flat stomach, trying to comprehend the miracle growing inside her. When she reached the cabin, the older children were managing the younger ones with practiced ease, and she was able to slip away to the bedroom she shared with Logan. He came home as the sun was setting, his strong frame silhouetted in the doorway as he entered their room. He smiled when he saw Grace sitting on the bed, but his smile faded when he noticed the serious expression on her face. "What is wrong?" he asked immediately, crossing to her in 3 long strides. "What did Clara say? Are you sick?" Grace took his hands and pulled him down to sit beside her on the bed. "I am not sick," she said carefully, "but I did receive surprising news." Logan's face was a mask of concern, his jaw tight. "Tell me." "Logan, I am pregnant," Grace said, the words feeling surreal even as she spoke them. "I know that should be impossible. I know Clara told me years ago that I could never have children, but she examined me today and she is certain. We are going to have a baby." Logan's expression cycled through disbelief, shock, wonder, and finally joy so pure and intense that it transformed his usually serious face. "A baby, truly, truly," Grace said, tears beginning to fall. "I am scared, Logan. What if something goes wrong? What if I lose the baby? What if my body cannot carry to term?" Logan pulled her into his arms, holding her close, his own eyes wet with tears he did not bother to hide. "Then we will face that together, just as we have faced everything else. But Grace, do you not see? This is a gift. After everything we have been through, after building our family and finding happiness, now we get this too. A child made from our love. It does not replace or diminish the love we have for our other children. It just adds to it." "You are right," Grace whispered against his chest. "I just never imagined this could happen. I had made peace with it." "Sometimes," Logan said, his voice rough with emotion, "life gives us gifts we never expected. This is one of those times. We are going to have a baby, Grace, our baby." The pregnancy was not easy. Grace experienced significant morning sickness for the first few months, and as her belly grew, she found herself exhausted more easily than she had expected. Clara monitored her closely, as did Dr. Morrison, who admitted he had never seen a case quite like this one. But as the months passed and the baby continued to grow, Hope grew as well. The children were excited about the prospect of a new baby sibling, though the younger ones did not fully understand the significance of this child being born to Grace rather than adopted. Logan was fiercely protective during the pregnancy, insisting Grace rest frequently and taking over many of her household duties. Peter and Sarah stepped up to help more with their younger siblings, and the whole family seemed to rally around Grace. Logan would talk to her belly at night, his deep voice gentle as he told the baby stories about the mountains and forests, about the family waiting to meet them. In late March of 1878, as winter was finally releasing its grip on Iowa, Grace went into labor. Logan rode into town himself to fetch Clara, moving faster than he had in years. Clara came with her bag and her experience, setting up in the bedroom while Logan paced the main room like a caged animal. Sarah took charge of the younger children, keeping them calm and occupied despite the tension in the house. The labor was long and difficult. Grace's body, despite having healed, still bore the scars of old injuries, and childbirth pushed her to her absolute limits. Clara worked tirelessly, her skilled hands guiding the process, while Grace fought with every ounce of strength she possessed. Logan insisted on being in the room despite the impropriety, holding Grace's hand, letting her squeeze until his bones ached, murmuring encouragement and love. Finally, after nearly 20 hours of labor, a baby's cry filled the room. Clara worked quickly, cleaning the infant and wrapping the tiny body in soft blankets before placing the baby in Grace's exhausted arms. "A boy," Clara announced, her face streaked with happy tears. "You have a son, Grace." A beautiful, healthy son. Grace looked down at the tiny face, at the dark hair so like Logan's, at the small fingers that wrapped around her thumb with surprising strength. The baby opened his eyes, and Grace saw they were green like hers. Her son. Their son. The child she had been told she could never have, now real and warm and perfect in her arms. Logan leaned over them both, his hand gentle on the baby's head, his eyes shining with tears he did not try to hide. "He is perfect," Logan whispered. "You are perfect. I love you so much, Grace. Thank you. Thank you for this gift. We did this together," Grace said, looking up at her husband with all the love in her heart shining in her eyes. "Everything we have, we built together." They named the baby Lucas, after Logan's father who had died when Logan was young. Lucas Quillen was welcomed into a family that already overflowed with love, and he thrived from his first day. The older children doted on him, especially the girls who fought over who got to hold him. Peter was surprisingly gentle with his baby brother, and even young, Daniel was fascinated by the tiny infant. The years continued to pass, each one bringing its own blessings. Lucas grew into a strong, happy child who had his father's love of the outdoors and his mother's kind heart. Peter married a local girl when he was 21 and built a cabin on the Quillen land, staying close to the family that had given him everything. Sarah trained as a teacher and opened a small school in Council Bluffs, where she taught not just reading and writing but also kindness and acceptance. Michael's woodworking business grew, and he eventually opened a shop in town. The twins both married brothers from a neighboring farm and lived close enough to visit frequently. Daniel, showing an aptitude for numbers, began keeping books for local businesses. Grace and Logan's cabin, which had started as a simple structure for two, became the heart of a sprawling family compound. More buildings were added over the years as children married and had children of their own. The Quillens became a cornerstone of the Council Bluffs community, known for their generosity and open hearts. Grace served on the church board and organized efforts to help orphans and struggling families. Logan, despite his mountain man roots, became a respected figure in town, known for his integrity and the way he had built a family from love rather than just blood. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Logan took Grace back to the spot by the Missouri River where he had proposed. They were both older now, with gray threading through their hair and lines on their faces earned through years of hard work and laughter. But the love between them burned as strong as ever, perhaps stronger for having weathered so many seasons together. "Do you remember what I said to you the day Clara told you that you could not have children?" Logan asked as they stood watching the sunset paint the sky. "Every word," Grace said. "You told me I could have your whole heart and that would be enough." "I meant it then and I mean it now," Logan said, turning to face his wife. "Though I had no idea then how much my heart would expand. You took my whole heart, Grace, and you filled it with more love than I knew existed. You gave me children, both the ones we took in and the one we made together. You gave me a home, a purpose, a reason to be more than I thought I could be. You gave me everything." Grace reached up to touch Logan's face, the same gesture she had made so many years ago. "We gave each other everything," she said. "That day you found me in the wagon, bleeding and broken, I thought my life was over. I could not have imagined that I was actually at the beginning of my real life, the life I was meant to live with you." Logan kissed her then, with all the passion and tenderness of their decades together, and Grace kissed him back, grateful beyond words for the path that had led her to this man, this life, this love. They lived many more years together, long enough to see grandchildren and even great-grandchildren running around the Quillen land, long enough to celebrate 50 years of marriage, surrounded by the family they had built through love and determination and faith. Long enough to know, without doubt, that they had lived well and loved deeply. When Logan died at the age of 79, peacefully in his sleep with Grace beside him, the funeral brought together one of the largest gatherings Council Bluffs had ever seen. Children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, along with countless people whose lives had been touched by Logan's quiet generosity and strength, came to pay their respects. Grace stood strong through the service, her hand held by Lucas, who was now a grown man of 40 with children of his own. Grace lived another 5 years after Logan's death, content in the knowledge that she would see him again. She spent those years surrounded by family, telling stories about the mountain man who had saved her life and then given her a life worth living. She told them about the day Clara had pronounced her unable to have children, and how Logan had responded with love instead of rejection. She told them about building their family, about the children they had taken in, and the love they had shared. She told them everything, wanting them to understand that family was not just about blood, that love could conquer even the most impossible circumstances. When Grace Quillen died at the age of 73, she was buried beside her husband on a hill overlooking their land. The headstone was simple but bore the inscription that Lucas had chosen. She could not have children, but she had love beyond measure. Below that, on Logan's side, it read, "He gave her his whole heart and she gave him the world." The Quillen family continued to grow and thrive in the generations that followed, but they never forgot their origins. The story of Logan and Grace became a family legend, passed down to each new generation. The story of how a mountain man had saved a broken woman, how they had fallen in love despite every obstacle, how they had built a family when the world said it was impossible. The story of how Logan had given Grace his whole heart, and how that had been enough to change both their lives forever. Their legacy lived on not just in their descendants, but in the countless lives they had touched, the children they had saved, the love they had shared. In the end, that was what mattered most. Not the struggles or the pain or the impossibility of their circumstances, but the love that had conquered all of it. The love that had built a family, a home, a life worth living. The love that proved time and again that the heart has infinite capacity when given the chance to grow. And on quiet evenings, when the descendants of Logan and Grace Quillen gathered on the land that their ancestors had first cultivated, they would sometimes feel a presence in the breeze, a sense that the love that had started everything was still there, still watching over them. The love of a mountain man and the woman he had saved, the love that had defied every expectation and created something beautiful from brokenness. That love, like the land itself, was eternal. And it was enough. More than enough. It was everything.